My name is Nicole Stevens, and I am 32 years old. To my family, I am nothing more than a failure, a daughter who wasted her potential to count boxes of spam in an army warehouse. But they don't know the truth. Yesterday, at my younger brother's infantry graduation under the scorching Georgia sun, my father pointed a finger in my face and said, "Sit in the back row, Nicole. Don't let your sloppy appearance embarrass your brother." I did exactly what he asked. I swallowed the lump of bitter rage in my throat and took my seat among the strangers. But then, Drill Sergeant Frey, the terror of the entire base, suddenly halted the marching formation. He didn't look at the generals on the reviewing stand. He marched straight toward me, the useless daughter in the cheap seats, slammed his heels together, and executed a perfect hand salute reserved for a supreme commander. My father's face went from triumphant to ghost white in a split second. He didn't know that single salute just triggered a chain of events that would expose the darkest secret of this base and rip his perfect family facade apart forever. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you believe that a person's value isn't found in what they brag about, but in the burdens they silently carry. The humidity at Fort Benning doesn't just make you hot, it owns you. It wraps around your throat like a wet wool blanket and squeezes until you can barely breathe. It was 10 in the morning, and the air was already thick enough to chew on. Around me, the grandstands of the parade field were packed with families fanning themselves with programs, the air smelling of sunscreen, diesel exhaust, and cheap perfume. My parents, Robert and Linda Stevens, looked like they were attending a royal coronation. Dad was wearing his best navy blue suit. Despite the 90-degree heat, his chest puffed out so far I thought the buttons on his shirt might turn into projectiles. Mom was in a floral Sunday dress, her hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde curls that not even a hurricane could disturb. They sat in the front row of the VIP section, a spot reserved for immediate family members. They looked perfect. They looked proud. And they looked at me like I was a stain on a silk sheet. I wasn't wearing a suit. I was wearing a pair of faded Levi's, a plain black t-shirt, and my beat-up work boots. I hadn't slept in 30 hours because I'd just flown in from a black site briefing in Syria via a cargo transport. But I couldn't tell them that. To them, I was just Nicole, the specialist E4 who worked in logistics, the box kicker, the disappointment. "Nicole, honey," my mother whispered, leaning in close but not touching me, as if poverty were contagious. Her voice had that sugary southern drawl that dripped with venom. "Why don't you go sit up a few rows back? You know, near the walkway? You smell a little bit like industrial grease and sweat. We don't want to distract Adam when he marches by, do we?" I looked at her. Her makeup was flawless. Her eyes were cold. "Sure, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "And tuck that shirt in," my father snapped, not even looking at me. His eyes were glued to the empty parade field, waiting for his golden boy. "God, look at you. You look like a mechanic. Sit in the back. Don't embarrass us today. This is Adam's day." I didn't argue. I didn't tell him that the grease smell was actually residue from a hydraulic line that burst on a C-130 while we were extracting a high-value target 2 days ago. I didn't tell him that the reason my eyes were red wasn't laziness, but the aftermath of a flashbang grenade during a breach simulation. I stood up and walked up the metal steps, feeling the vibration of the crowd under my boots. I found an empty spot in the nosebleed section, surrounded by distant cousins and girlfriends of privates who couldn't get VIP passes. I sat down, crossed my arms, and stared at the backs of my parents' heads. From here, they looked small. General James Mattis once said, "Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet." It was a quote I lived by in the Joint Special Operations Command. Right now, staring at my father's stiff neck, I was holding onto the polite and professional part with every ounce of discipline I had left. Then the drums started. A rhythmic, thundering cadence that vibrated in your chest. The dust kicked up from the red Georgia clay as 300 soldiers marched onto the field. They were young, shaved-headed, and terrified. And there, leading the 3rd platoon, was Adam. My little brother looked good. I had to give him that. He was marching with his chin up, his M4 rifle held perfectly across his chest. He was 22, the golden child. The one who got the new cars and the college tuition while I worked double shifts at a Waffle House. But Adam wasn't bad. He was just blind. He believed the myth our parents had built around him. That's him. That's my boy. Dad's voice boomed over the crowd. He was actually standing up, waving his program like a maniac. He turned to a complete stranger sitting next to him, a quiet man in a wheelchair wearing a Vietnam veteran hat. You see that kid? Dad shouted, pointing at Adam. Top of his class, infantry, a real warrior, not like... He paused, and I saw him turn his head, scanning the crowd behind him until his eyes locked on me, sitting 10 rows up. He pointed a thick finger at me. Not like his sister up there. See her? She pushes papers in a warehouse. Logistics. Probably get discharged soon for being lazy. It's a shame, really. But the boy? The boy is a killer. The Vietnam vet looked back at me, then at my dad, and shifted uncomfortably. She served, didn't she? The old man mumbled. She occupies space, Dad laughed, a cruel barking sound. She's a glorified maid in camouflage. My hands clenched into fists on my knees, my knuckles turned white. I took a deep breath, inhaling the humid air. Control, Major. Control. The formation reached the center of the field. This was the moment they were supposed to perform, pass in review. Turning their heads to salute the brigadier general standing on the raised platform. The band swelled, the flag snapped in the breeze, and then everything stopped. Platoon, halt! The scream tore through the air like a majestic rip of canvas. It wasn't the general, it was Senior Drill Sergeant Mason Frey. Frey was a legend at Fort Benning, a ranger, a pathfinder, a man who supposedly ate glass for breakfast. He was the kind of NCO who terrified officers and enlisted alike. When Frey yelled, the birds stopped singing. The formation froze instantly. 300 boots slammed into the dirt with a singular, thunderous thud. The dust swirled. The band faltered and trailed off into an awkward silence. This wasn't in the script. The general on the podium leaned forward, confused. The crowd murmured. Frey marched out from the side of the formation. He didn't walk. He stalked. He moved with a predatory grace, his campaign hat pulled low over his eyes. He walked past the reviewing stand. He ignored the general. He ignored the colonels. He walked straight toward the VIP section. My father smiled. He actually puffed his chest out further, thinking Frey was coming to congratulate him on raising such a fine son. Dad even started to extend his hand, a smug grin plastered on his face, ready to accept the glory he believed he was owed. Frey walked right past him. He didn't even blink. He treated my father, my mother, and their expensive clothes like they were invisible ghosts. He marched past the first row, past the second. He marched up the metal stairs, the rhythmic clank, clank, clank of his boots, the only sound in the entire stadium. He stopped directly in front of me. The silence was absolute. 3,000 people were watching. My parents had twisted around in their seats, their mouths hanging open. Frey stood rigid. He looked at me, the woman in the dirty t-shirt and work boots. And then, with a snap that echoed across the bleachers, he drove his right hand up to the brim of his hat. It was a textbook salute, sharp, respectful, unwavering. "Ma'am," Frey barked, his voice projecting clear and loud, strong enough for my father to hear every syllable. "Reviewing officer on deck. I was not informed of your presence, Major Stevens. My apologies for the lack of protocol." "Major." The word hung in the heavy air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Down in the front row, my father's hand went limp. The paper cup of Coca-Cola he was holding slipped from his fingers. It hit the metal floorboards with a wet splat, sending brown fizz foaming over his polished dress shoes. He didn't move. He couldn't move. He stared at me, his eyes bulging, his face draining of color until he looked like a corpse. Mom let out a small, strangled gasp, her hand flying to her pearl necklace as if she were choking. I didn't look at them. I looked at Frey. I saw the twinkle in the old sergeant's eye, the subtle acknowledgement of the game we were playing. He knew who I was. He knew I was Jayasok. He knew I outranked every single person on that field, including the general on the podium, when it came to operational authority. I slowly stood up. I didn't fix my hair. I didn't tuck in my shirt. I just straightened my back, returning the salute with a casual, lazy flick of my wrist. The kind of salute reserved for officers who have seen enough combat to stop caring about the pageantry. "Carry on, Sergeant," I said, my voice low and cool. "Don't let me interrupt the show." "Hoo-ah, ma'am," Frey shouted. He cut his salute, did an about-face that was sharp enough to slice the air, and marched back down the stairs. I didn't sit back down. I couldn't. The air in the stadium had changed. The whispers were starting, spreading like wildfire. I could feel hundreds of eyes burning into me, but the only ones I felt were the two pairs of eyes in the front row. I looked down at my father one last time. He looked up at me, confusion and horror warring for dominance on his face. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd been betting on the wrong horse for 30 years. I didn't give him the satisfaction of an explanation. I simply put my sunglasses back on, turned my back on the ceremony, and began to walk toward the exit ramp. My boots clanged against the metal, a lonely, rhythmic beat against the shocked silence of my family. The show was over, but the war had just begun. I sat inside the cab of my truck, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. It was a beat-up 2008 Ford F-150, the kind with rust eating away at the wheel wells and an air conditioner that had given up the ghost somewhere back in 2015. The interior smelled of old coffee, stale dust, and the faint, metallic scent of gun oil that seemed to seep from my pores no matter how many times I showered. The Georgia heat was already turning the cab into an oven, baking me alive in my own silence. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. I hadn't felt real fear since a botched extraction in Yemen 3 years ago, but from the adrenaline of restraint. It took every ounce of discipline I possessed not to turn around and scream the truth into my father's face. But discipline was what I did. It was who I was. 7 years. That number floated in the stagnant air of the truck like a ghost. It had been 7 years since I signed the non-disclosure agreement with the Joint Special Operations Command. I remembered the room where it happened, windowless, cold, smelling of floor wax and secrets. The recruiter, a man with eyes like flint, had slid the paper across the metal table. "If you sign this, Stevens," he had said, his voice low, "you disappear. Your victories will be classified. Your medals will go into a drawer that only we can open. To the world, you'll be a paper pusher, a nobody. Can your ego handle that?" I had signed without hesitation. I didn't do it for the glory. I did it because I was good at it. I was good at the shadows, but I hadn't anticipated the cost. I hadn't anticipated that the nobody I became would be the person my own family despised. To protect them, to protect the mission, I had crafted the perfect lie. I was a specialist E4 in logistics, a box kicker, safe, boring, a failure. It was the only way to keep them from worrying, I told myself. But deep down, in the part of my heart I tried to keep locked away, I knew there was another reason. If they thought I was a failure, they wouldn't expect anything from me. And if they didn't expect anything, they couldn't be disappointed. Or so I thought. My eyes drifted to the cracked dashboard and suddenly, I wasn't in the parking lot at Fort Benning anymore. I was back at the kitchen table in our cramped house in Savannah 7 years ago. It was a Tuesday. I remembered because Tuesday was meatloaf night. The smell of burnt ketchup and onions filled the kitchen. My acceptance letter to West Point was sitting in my back pocket, folded into a tight square, burning against my skin. I'd worked for 4 years to get that nomination. I had the grades, the physical fitness scores, the recommendation from a senator. It was my ticket out. My ticket to matter. But before I could pull it out, Dad walked in. He was beaming, a rare expression that made his face look younger, less hard. He tossed a set of keys onto the table. They jingled merrily, a sound of promise and money. "Adam, boy, come look outside," Dad yelled. We all went to the window. There, gleaming in the driveway under the street lamp, was a brand new Chevrolet Silverado. Red, shiny, expensive. "Graduation gift," Dad said, clapping Adam on the back. Adam was just finishing high school with a C average and a vague plan to maybe join the army later. She's a beauty, Dad, Adam shouted, running out the door. I stood there, my hand hovering over my back pocket. Dad, I said quietly. I got into West Point. He turned to me, the smile vanishing instantly. He looked tired. He looked annoyed. West Point? The military academy? Yes, I said, a spark of hope igniting in my chest. It's a full scholarship. I'll be an officer. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Nicole, look. We just spent the savings on the truck for Adam. He needs it to get around, to find himself. You're a girl. West Point is hard. It's for men who want to be generals. You'll go there, struggle, probably drop out, or meet some lieutenant and get married. Then what? All that effort for nothing. But it's free, Dad, I argued, my voice trembling. It's an honor. It's a waste, he said firmly, turning back to watch Adam rev the engine of his new truck. You want to go to college? Go to community college, get a nursing degree, something useful, something for a woman. Don't try to be something you're not. I never showed him the letter. I burned it in the sink that night. Instead of West Point, I enlisted. I started from the bottom. While Adam drove his Silverado to parties, I worked double shifts at the Waffle House on Abercorn Street to save money for a car that ran half the time. I served Grand Slams and scattered smothered hash browns to truckers and tourists until my feet bled, listening to customers talk about their lazy kids, while I calculated how many more hours I needed to buy new tires. Invest in the boy, Dad always said. He's the legacy. The memory shifted. The smell of burnt ketchup was replaced by the stench of swamp water and fear. 6 months after I enlisted, I went dark. My parents thought I had been washed out of basic training or sent to some remedial unit because I stopped calling. They told the neighbors, Nicole's having a hard time adjusting. She's not cut out for the discipline. They didn't know I was in the SEER school: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. I was in a mock POW camp in the deep woods of North Carolina. It was winter. I was wet, freezing, and hadn't eaten in 3 days. My interrogator, a man who played his role with terrifying realism, had locked me in a box too small to sit up in and too short to lie down in. Just quit, Stevens, he would whisper through the air holes. You're weak. You're a girl. Go home to mommy. I listened to the men in the other boxes break. Big men, strong men, men who looked like the soldiers my father idolized. They cried. They begged. They gave up the codes. I didn't break. I focused on the anger. I focused on the look in my father's eyes when he gave Adam that truck. I focused on the not good enough that had been tattooed on my soul since birth. I turned that pain into a weapon. When they pulled me out of that box 3 days later, I was the only woman left standing. I was bruised, dehydrated, and hallucinating. But I was unbroken. That was the day I realized something profound. Pain doesn't destroy you if you refuse to let it. It refines you. Back in the F-150, I blinked away the memories. A bead of sweat rolled down my temple. My phone buzzed in the center console, but I ignored it. I knew who it was. It was probably Colonel Shaw asking why a drill sergeant had just saluted a logistics specialist on a parade field. I'd deal with that later. I looked into the rearview mirror. My breath caught in my throat. Running across the parking lot, weaving between the rows of cars, was my father. He was red-faced, sweating profusely in his blue suit, his tie flapping over his shoulder like a broken wing. He looked ridiculous. He looked furious. He wasn't coming to apologize. He wasn't coming to ask if I was okay. I knew that run. It was the run of a man whose ego had been bruised, a man who needed to re-establish dominance before the concrete of his worldview set permanently. He loved the uniform. He loved the medals. He loved the idea of a soldier son. But he didn't love the soldier. He loved the reflection of himself he saw in Adam. And seeing me, his failure, receive the respect he craved for his son, that was a sin he couldn't forgive. The fear of the Lord is instruction in wisdom, and humility comes before honor. Proverbs 15:33. I whispered the verse to the empty cab. It was something my grandmother used to say. Humility comes before honor. I had lived in humility for 7 years. I had eaten the dirt. I had lived in the shadows. I had let them think I was nothing so they could feel like everything. But honor? Honor wasn't something they could give me, and it wasn't something they could take away. The mirror filled with his angry face. He was close now, shouting something I couldn't hear through the glass. Before I tell you what he said when he reached my window, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like no matter what you achieved, it was never enough for the people who were supposed to love you the most? If you know that feeling of being the invisible child, please hit the like button. And in the comments, just type, I am enough. Let's remind each other that our worth isn't defined by anyone else's opinion. My father reached the truck. He slammed his fist against the passenger window, the sound exploding in the small space like a gunshot. His mouth was moving, shaping words I knew would hurt. But for the first time in my life, looking at him through the dirty glass, he didn't look like a giant. He looked like a small, angry man trapped outside in the heat, while I sat safe in the driver's seat, holding the keys to my own life. I took a breath, unlocked the doors, and prepared for war. The glass of my driver's side window vibrated violently as my father's fist slammed against it again. Thud, thud, thud. Open this damn door, Nicole, he screamed, his voice muffled but unmistakably filled with the kind of rage that used to make me cower under my bed when I was 10. Don't you dare ignore me. He was standing right next to the truck, his face pressed close to the glass, distorted and red like a man having a stroke. Sweat was pouring down his forehead, matting his thinning hair to his scalp. He looked less like a proud father and more like a man whose entire reality had just cracked, and he was desperate to smash whatever had caused the fracture. I didn't flinch. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, watching him unravel. Inside the cab, the silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic pounding of his fist and the faint hum of the engine idling. You think you're funny? He shouted, spit flying from his lips. You think this is some kind of joke? Did you pay him? Is that it? He stepped back, looking around wildly to see if anyone was watching, then leaned in again, his eyes wild. How much did you pay Sergeant Frey to put on that little show, huh? A month's salary? Did you bribe him with whiskey? Tell me. I took a slow breath, letting the air fill my lungs and expand my ribcage. This was the moment. I could drive away. I could leave him there, screaming at dust. But something in me, maybe the soldier, maybe the daughter who was finally done, needed to look him in the eye. I pressed the button on the door panel. The window motor whined in protest as the glass lowered exactly 2 inches, just enough to hear him clearly, just enough for my voice to reach him, not enough for him to reach in. Step back, Dad, I said. My voice was quiet. It wasn't the voice I used at Thanksgiving dinner when I politely asked for the potatoes. It wasn't the voice I used when I called to wish Mom a happy birthday and listened to her complain about her arthritis. It was my command voice, low, flat, devoid of emotion but heavy with authority. It was the voice I used to order airstrikes. My father froze. His hand, raised to strike the glass again, hovered in midair. He blinked, confusion flickering across his face like static on an old TV screen. He had never heard me speak like that. To him, I was Nicole the mouse. Nicole, the doormat. What did you say to me? He sputtered, his face turning a darker shade of purple. I said step back, I repeated, turning my head slowly to look him directly in the eyes. I didn't take off my sunglasses. You are causing a scene on a federal military installation. Security will be here in less than 2 minutes if you don't lower your voice. For a second, he looked unsure. The authority in my tone threw him off balance. But then, the toxic pride, that deep, insecure masculinity that defined his entire generation, came roaring back. He couldn't let a woman, let alone his daughter, tell him what to do. Don't you quote regulations to me, he roared, grabbing the top of the window with his fingers and shaking the truck. I know this base better than you ever will. I almost enlisted in '82. I know how this works. He almost enlisted. That was Robert Stevens in a nutshell. A man who built his identity on things he almost did and resented anyone who actually did them. "You embarrassed us, Nicole," he yelled, pointing a finger through the crack in the window, inches from my nose. "You embarrassed your brother. Today is Adam's day. He is a warrior. He earned this. And you have to make it about you, don't you? You have to pull some stunt because you're jealous." "Jealous," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Yes, jealous." He was hysterical now, his voice cracking. People walking to their cars were stopping to stare. A young corporal with his family looked over, concern on his face, but my father didn't care. He was performing. He was the victim. "You couldn't hack it," he screamed. "You couldn't handle West Point, so you quit. You couldn't handle a real job, so you hide in a warehouse. And now, when Adam succeeds where you failed, you have to mock him. You have to mock the uniform by pretending to be something you're not." He leaned in closer, his breath smelling of stale coffee and peppermint. "You are an imposter, Nicole. That's what you are. You're a fraud, and everyone knows it. Do you think Frey respects you? He was laughing at you. He was mocking you, and you were too stupid to see it." The accusation hung in the hot air. Imposter. Fraud. It was almost funny. I was the only person in this family who wasn't pretending. He was playing the role of the patriarch. Mom was playing the role of the doting, supportive mother. Adam was playing the role of the golden hero. And I was the reality they couldn't afford to acknowledge. I looked at his finger, still poking through the window. I had a sudden, vivid image of grabbing it and breaking it. It would be easy. A simple twist of the wrist. Krav Maga basics. But I didn't. That's what the old Nicole would have fantasized about in anger. Major Stevens didn't need to break fingers to prove a point. "Are you done?" I asked. He blinked, caught off guard by my lack of reaction. "What?" "Are you done yelling?" I asked again. "Because I have work to do." "Work?" He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Go count your boxes, Nicole. Go hide in your warehouse. But don't you dare show your face at the house tonight. We are having a celebration for a real soldier. We don't need you bringing your failure into our home." That stung. It was a precision strike, aimed right at the softest part of me, the part that still, stupidly, wanted to belong. "Mom invited me," I said. "Your mother is too nice," he spat. "She pities you. But I don't. I'm ashamed of you. Now get out of my sight." He stepped back and kicked the tire of my truck, a petty, childish gesture from a grown man. I didn't say another word. I didn't defend myself. I didn't tell him that the real soldier he was celebrating had nearly failed his land navigation course, and I had to pull strings from the shadows to get him a passing grade so he wouldn't wash out. I didn't tell him that the only reason he was standing on this base safely was because my team had stopped a terror cell in Atlanta 2 weeks ago. I simply put the truck in drive. "Goodbye, Dad," I said. I pressed the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, the tires crunching on the gravel. I saw him in the side mirror, standing there in his ill-fitting suit, hands on his hips, shaking his head as if he were the one who had been wronged. He looked small. He looked pathetic. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad for me. I felt sad for him. I drove toward the exit gate, my heart rate slowly returning to normal. The air conditioning was still broken, but the wind rushing through the open window felt like freedom. I was halfway to the main road when a sound cut through the noise of the wind. A sharp, insistent vibration coming from the glove compartment. My stomach dropped. It wasn't my personal phone. It was the other one, the one that didn't exist. I reached over, popped the latch, and pulled out a heavy black satellite phone. It looked like a brick from the 1990s, ugly and functional. The screen was flashing red. One word was scrolling across the display: DEFCON 3. I pulled the truck onto the shoulder of the road, dust billowing up around me. DEFCON 3 meant roundhouse. It meant an increase in force readiness above normal readiness. It meant the Air Force was ready to mobilize in 15 minutes. It meant something bad was happening. I punched in my access code. The screen cleared and a secure text message appeared. Sender. SOC Central Time, 11:42 hours. Status: critical message. Cyber intrusion detected on J's servers. Source traced to Fort Benning internal network. Initiate protocol. Ghost, report to SOC immediately. I stared at the screen. A cyber attack. From inside the base. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a drill. Someone was trying to breach the Joint Special Operations Command network, and they were doing it from right here, under our noses. I looked at the time. 11:43 a.m. My mother wanted me home for the party at 5:10 p.m. My father had just told me to stay away, and now the United States military needed me to hunt down a traitor. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. The irony was almost suffocating. My family thought I was a disgrace who counted boxes. My country thought I was the only one who could save the network. I gripped the gear shift. "Sorry, Dad," I whispered to the empty truck. "I guess I won't be counting boxes today." I spun the steering wheel, swinging the heavy truck around in a tight U-turn, kicking up a cloud of red Georgia dust. I wasn't going to the warehouse. I was going to war. And God help anyone who stood in my way. I should have kept driving. I should have driven straight to the base, reported to the Secure Operations Center, and never looked back. But 5 minutes after I turned my truck around, my phone rang. Not the secure satellite phone, but my personal cell. "Mom," I whispered, looking at the screen. I answered it. I always answered it. It was a reflex, a conditioned response drilled into me since birth. "Nicole," my mother's voice was trembling, thick with tears. "Please, just come home. Your father he's beside himself. The neighbors are talking. If you don't come, it'll look like you're admitting guilt. Please, honey, for the family. Just for an hour. For the family." That phrase was the weapon she wielded with surgical precision. It was the guilt trip that had kept me tethered to them for 32 years. "I'm on my way," I said, hating myself for saying it. I had to stop at the house anyway. My encrypted laptop and tactical go bag were hidden under the floorboards of my old bedroom closet. If I was going to hunt a cyber terrorist, I needed my gear. When I pulled into the driveway of the small ranch-style house on Elm Street, it looked like the 4th of July had exploded. American flags lined the walkway. Red, white, and blue balloons bobbed in the humid breeze. A banner hung across the garage door. "Congratulations, Private Adam Stevens, our hero." The smell hit me as soon as I stepped out of the truck. BBQ ribs, slow-cooked, smoky, slathered in that thick, sweet molasses sauce my dad was famous for. It was the smell of home. It was the smell of celebration. And today it smelled like rejection. I walked up the driveway, my boots heavy on the concrete. Through the large bay window, I could see them. The house was packed. My parents had invited everyone. Aunts, uncles, neighbors, people from church. They were laughing, holding drinks, clapping Adam on the back. I took a deep breath and opened the front door. The noise died instantly. It was like someone had cut the power to a stereo. 30 heads turned to look at me. The laughter evaporated, replaced by a thick, suffocating silence. My father was standing by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He glared at me, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't say anything. He'd already said his piece in the parking lot. Now he was letting the crowd do the work. "Well, look who decided to show up," a shrill voice cut through the quiet. It was Aunt Kendra. She was sitting on the recliner, nursing a glass of Chardonnay, her face flushed. Kendra had never liked me, mostly because I refused to join her pyramid scheme selling essential oils 3 years ago. "We were just talking about you, Nicole," Kendra said, swirling her wine. She looked around the room, making sure she had an audience. "We heard about your little performance at the graduation. Tell me, how much does an actor cost these days? Did you have to save up your warehouse wages for a whole year to afford that?" A ripple of laughter went through the room. It wasn't loud, but it was cruel. I didn't look at Kendra. I looked at Adam. He was standing in the corner, holding a beer, still wearing his dress uniform. He looked uncomfortable. He looked at the floor, at his shoes, at the ceiling, anywhere but at me. "It wasn't a performance," I said quietly. "Oh, honey, give it up," Kendra laughed. "We all know you're just jealous. Adam is the real deal. You're just, well, you're you. My mother bustled out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron that said, World's Best Mom. She looked frantic, her eyes darting between me and Dad, desperate to keep the peace. Okay, let's eat, she chirped, her voice too high, too bright. The ribs are ready. Come on, everyone, to the dining room. The tension broke as people shuffled toward the dining room, eager for food and eager to ignore me. I followed them, mostly because I needed to get to my old room down the hall, and the dining room was on the way. The table was set beautifully. The good china, the white porcelain with the gold rim that Mom only brought out for Christmas and Easter, was laid out. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. There was a massive platter of ribs in the center, flanked by bowls of potato salad, coleslaw, and cornbread. And on the sideboard, a huge apple pie. Everyone took their seats, Dad at the head, Mom at the foot, Adam on Dad's right, Aunt Kendra, Uncle Bob, the neighbors. They all pulled out chairs. I stood at the edge of the room. I looked at the table. There were 12 chairs. There were 12 people sitting. There was no chair for me. I stood there, feeling the blood drain from my face. I looked at my mother. She was busy pouring iced tea, avoiding my gaze. Mom? I said. She looked up, feigning surprise. Oh dear, I must have miscounted. We borrowed the neighbor's chairs and we ran out. She didn't miscount. She never miscounted. She bustled over to the sideboard and picked up a stack of paper plates. The cheap, flimsy white ones you use for a toddler's birthday party. She grabbed one, walked over to the serving platter, and used a pair of tongs to pick up a rib. It wasn't a whole rack. It was a small burnt end piece that had fallen off the bone. She plopped it onto the paper plate, added a spoonful of watery coleslaw, and handed it to me. Here you go, honey, she said, smiling that tight, fake smile. Since there's no room at the table, why don't you go sit out on the back porch? It's nice and cool out there. Besides, she lowered her voice to a whisper. You're used to eating out of cans in that warehouse, aren't you? This is a treat. The room went silent again. Adam looked up, his face pale. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but then Dad cleared his throat loudly. Adam snapped his mouth shut and looked back down at his plate. I looked at the paper plate in my hand. It was sagging under the weight of the grease. I looked at the china plates on the table. I looked at my family. They weren't just excluding me. They were erasing me. They were telling me in the clearest language possible that I did not belong. I was the help. I was the ghost. I was the mistake they tolerated, but never celebrated. Sure, Mom, I said. My voice didn't shake. The porch is fine. I turned around and walked out the sliding glass door. The back porch was dark. The sun had gone down, and the only light came from the yellow glow of the windows behind me. I sat down on the old rusted metal glider that had been there since I was a kid. The air was cooling down, but it was still humid, the crickets chirping a frantic rhythm in the grass. I put the paper plate on the small side table. I didn't touch the food. Through the glass, I could see them. They were laughing. Dad was making a toast, raising his glass to Adam. Mom was beaming. Aunt Kendra was stuffing her face with ribs. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, perfect and wholesome. And I was on the outside, looking in. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the satellite phone. It vibrated again, a harsh buzz against my palm. Sender. SOC Central Status. Red update. Malware activated. Firewall breach imminent. Target identified as mainframe Sector 7. Major Stevens, we need intervention now. I stared at the message. Sector 7. That was the nuclear command protocols. This wasn't just a hack. This was an act of war. I looked back at the window. My father was laughing, his head thrown back. He had no idea. None of them did. They were celebrating a boy who played soldier, while the woman they banished to the porch was the only thing standing between them and a catastrophe. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet sound of a tether breaking. The guilt, the obligation, the desperate need for their approval. It all just dissolved. I stood up. I picked up the paper plate. I walked over to the large metal garbage can by the back door. I looked at the burnt rib. I looked at the watery coleslaw. "Enjoy the party," I whispered. I dropped the plate into the trash. It landed with a soft thump. I didn't go back inside to get my laptop. I didn't need it. I had a backup drive in my truck. I didn't need to say goodbye. I didn't need to explain. I walked around the side of the house, through the dark shadows of the azalea bushes. I climbed into my truck, the engine roaring to life like a waking beast. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the banner again. Our hero. I put the truck in gear and floored it. The tires spun on the asphalt, screeching as I peeled away from the house, away from the lies, away from the people who would never know who I really was. The time for being the good daughter was over. Major Stevens was on duty, and she was done eating scraps. The drive from my parents' house to Fort Benning usually took 20 minutes. I made it in 12. My Ford F-150 rattled and groaned as I pushed it to 80 miles per hour down Victory Drive. The night air whipped through the open windows, carrying the scent of pine and distant ozone. I wasn't Nicole the disappointment anymore. I wasn't the daughter who ate ribs off a paper plate on the back porch. That person had been left behind in a trash can on Elm Street. As the main gate of the base came into view, the transformation was complete. My posture straightened. My grip on the wheel tightened, not in anger, but in focus. My mind began to categorize and prioritize data streams: threat level, entry protocols, network architecture, containment strategies. I slowed the truck as I approached Checkpoint Alpha. The line for visitors and regular personnel was long, a snake of taillights stretching back onto the highway. But I didn't get in that line. I swung the truck into the far left lane, the lane marked with bold red letters, "Official use only." A young MP, military police officer, stepped out of the guard shack, his hand resting on the holster of his Sig Sauer P320. He looked annoyed. He saw a beat-up, rusted truck driven by a woman in a t-shirt and jeans trying to use the VIP lane. He held up a hand, palm out. "Stop the vehicle. Turn around, ma'am. This lane is for 06 and above, or special clearance personnel only." I rolled down the window. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply reached into my center console and pulled out my lanyard. Attached to it wasn't the standard green common access card that every soldier carried. It was a black card. Matte finish. No photo. Just a gold chip and the embossed seal of the Department of Homeland Security overlaid with the JSOC insignia. I held it out. The MP shone his flashlight on it. He squinted. Then his eyes widened. He looked from the card to my face, then back to the card. He pulled a scanner from his belt and swiped it. The scanner didn't beep. It emitted a low, steady tone. The small screen flashed red, then green. "Access granted. Level 5. Yankee White." The MP's annoyance vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer panic. He realized he had just tried to turn away someone with clearance higher than the base commander. "My apologies, ma'am," he stammered, snapping to attention so fast his hat almost fell off. He hit the button to open the barrier. "You are cleared for immediate entry." I gunned the engine, and the truck roared past the barrier. I drove deep into the heart of the base, heading toward the restricted sector on the north side, a cluster of nondescript concrete buildings surrounded by double fences and razor wire. This was the SOC, the Special Operations Center. I pulled up to the inner gate. The cameras recognized my license plate instantly. The heavy steel gates rolled back without me even having to stop. I parked the truck in a spot marked "Reserved, Command." It sat there, a rusted heap of junk next to the sleek black SUVs of the other high-ranking officers. The contrast was perfect. Inside the SOC, the air was cool and sterile. I walked up to the main security door. A retinal scanner glowed blue on the wall. I leaned in. A beam of red light swept across my eye. Beep. Identity confirmed, Major Nicole Stevens. The door hissed open. The SOC was in chaos. Dozens of analysts were hunched over monitors, typing furiously. Large screens on the wall displayed maps of the global network traffic, red lines pulsing like infected veins. Colonel Shaw was standing in the center of the room, barking orders. He looked stressed. I don't care what the firewall says, pull the plug on the external servers if you have to. Colonel, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. Shaw turned. Relief washed over his face. Stevens, thank God, we've got a massive breach. Someone is tunneling into the nuclear protocols. I know, I said, dropping my bag on the nearest desk. I saw the signature. It's the Hydra malware. If you pull the plug, it will trigger a kill switch and wipe the drives. Then what do we do? Shaw asked. I sat down at the main terminal. My fingers flew across the keyboard. We open the door. Let them think they're in. I'm initiating Protocol Aegis. We're going to trace the signal back to the source. But that's risky, Shaw warned. I didn't come here to play it safe, Colonel, I said, not looking up. I came here to kill the threat. For the next hour, I was in the zone. The world narrowed down to lines of code. I was hunting, and I was good at it. Outside, the night patrol was making its rounds. My brother, Private Adam Stevens, was walking point. He was tired, his feet hurt, and the adrenaline of the graduation had worn off, leaving him with a headache and a vague sense of disappointment. Keep it tight, ladies, the squad leader barked. Eyes open. They were patrolling the perimeter of the restricted sector. As they rounded the corner of the SOC building, Adam stopped. He blinked, rubbing his eyes. There, parked right in front of the main entrance, in a spot clearly marked for high command, was a truck. It was a rusted, beat-up 2008 Ford F-150 with a dent in the rear bumper. That's Nicole's truck, Adam whispered. He looked around. There were Humvees with mounted machine guns. There were black government Suburbans, and right in the middle of them sat his sister's piece of junk. Keep moving, Stevens, the squad leader hissed. But Sergeant, Adam said, pointing, that's my sister's truck. She works in the warehouse. She can't be here. If the MPs see this, they'll shoot her. Adam felt a surge of protective panic. Despite everything, Nicole was still his big sister. He couldn't let her get in trouble for parking in a top-secret zone. I have to check it out, Adam said, stepping out of formation. He jogged toward the truck. He expected to find Nicole inside, maybe crying, maybe lost. But the truck was empty. Then the heavy steel door of the SOC building hissed open. Adam froze. He ducked behind the bed of the truck, peering over the edge. Two people walked out. One was Senior Drill Sergeant Frey, the man who was a god of war in Adam's eyes. The other was a woman. It was Nicole. But it wasn't the Nicole he knew. It wasn't the sister who hunched her shoulders and mumbled apologies. She was standing tall, her spine steel straight. She was holding a tablet, the blue light illuminating her face with an intense, predatory focus. Frey was walking behind her, not beside her, behind her. Report, Sergeant, Nicole said. Her voice carried clearly in the night air. It was crisp, authoritative, and utterly commanding. Frey stopped, snapped his heels together, and stood at attention. Ma'am, the perimeter is secure. We have locked down the server nodes as you ordered. Colonel Shaw is awaiting your final authorization to counter-strike. Adam felt like the ground had just dissolved under his boots. Ma'am, ordered. Colonel Shaw? Nicole stopped and turned to Frey. She handed him the tablet. Good. Tell Shaw to initiate. And Frey? Yes, ma'am. Find out who authorized a civilian contractor to access the network logs. I want a name on my desk in 10 minutes. Understood, Major Stevens, Frey said. He saluted. A crisp, perfect salute. Nicole returned it casually, without even looking up. Go. Frey turned and ran back inside. Nicole stood there for a moment, alone under the floodlights. She looked dangerous. She looked powerful. Adam sank down against the tire of the rusted Ford. His rifle felt heavy in his hands. His entire life, every story his father had told him, every insult thrown at his sister, shattered into a million pieces. His sister wasn't a box kicker. She wasn't a failure. She was the boss. And he was just a boy playing dress-up in her world. I watched Frey disappear back into the SOC building, the heavy steel door hissing shut behind him. The silence of the restricted zone returned, broken only by the distant hum of generators and the chirp of crickets in the tall grass. I turned toward my truck. I needed to grab my backup drive. But as I reached for the door handle, I saw him. Huddled against the rear tire, practically curled into a ball, was a soldier. He was clutching his M4 rifle like a safety blanket, his helmet tilted askew. Even in the shadows, I recognized the terrified posture. "Get in the truck, Private," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was an order. Adam jumped as if I'd tased him. He scrambled up, fumbling with the door handle, and practically fell into the passenger seat. I slid into the driver's side and closed the door, sealing us in the quiet, stale air of the cab. I didn't turn on the engine. I just reached up and clicked on the dome light. The yellow light flooded the cab, illuminating Adam's pale, sweaty face. He was staring at me with wide eyes, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked at my hands, then at my face, then back at my hands as if trying to reconcile the two versions of his sister that were currently warring in his brain. "You," he whispered. "You're a major. JSOC?" I leaned back against the seat, letting out a long breath. "Yes." "But how?" Adam's voice cracked. "Why?" "For 7 years, Nicole. For 7 years, Mom and Dad have treated you like dirt. They call you a failure. They make you sit in the back row, they feed you off paper plates, and you just took it? Why didn't you tell them? Why did you let them humiliate you?" "Because they needed me to be a failure," I said simply. Adam blinked. "What?" I held up my right hand. Under the harsh dome light, the scars were impossible to miss. There was a jagged white line running across my palm from a knife fight in Kabul. There were thick, yellow calluses on my fingertips from handling hot brass and climbing ropes. There were burn marks on my knuckles. "Look at this hand, Adam," I said. "This isn't the hand of a logistics clerk. This is the hand of someone who kills people so that people like Mom and Dad can sleep at night without nightmares." I lowered my hand and looked him in the eye. "Our parents? They are simple people, Adam. They love the idea of the military, the parades, the flags, the glory. They need a hero to brag about at church. They need a golden child to validate their own lives." I gestured to his uniform, pristine and pressed, with his marksman badge and his National Defense Service medal. The pizza stain that everyone gets just for joining. "I gave them that in you," I continued. "If they knew what I really do, if they knew the things I've seen, the things I've had to do in the dark, it would break them. Or worse, it would terrify them. So, I let them have their hero, and I took the role of the disappointment. It keeps the balance." Adam stared at me, tears welling up in his eyes. "But it's not fair," he choked out. "It's not fair to you." "Fair?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. A Navy SEAL friend of mine once told me, "The only easy day was yesterday." Fairness is a civilian concept, Adam. In my world, there is only the mission and the cost. I paid the cost so you wouldn't have to. Adam looked down at his chest. He touched the shiny medals he had been so proud of just this morning. Now they looked like toys. Cheap plastic trinkets compared to the weight of the silence I carried. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the tears finally spilling over. "I'm so sorry, Nicole," I laughed. "When Dad made jokes about you," I laughed. "I thought I was better than you. I thought I was the soldier." He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "I've been such an idiot. I've been a coward." I watched him cry. Part of me, the sister part, wanted to hug him. But the major part knew that this pain was necessary. He needed to feel this. It was the only way he would grow up. "Stop crying," I said. It wasn't mean. It was firm. Adam sniffled and wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked at me, waiting for absolution. "You didn't know," I said, softening my tone just a fraction. "But now you do. And that means the game changes. You can't be the golden child anymore, Adam. You have to be a man. Can you do that?" Adam nodded vigorously. Yes, I can. I promise." "Good," I said, "because I'm going to need you to—" Suddenly the tactical radio clipped to my belt burst into life. The static hiss filled the small cab, cutting through the emotional moment like a knife. "Ghost, This is Overwatch. Be advised. Security team has apprehended a suspect in server room B. Repeat, suspect in custody. I grabbed the radio, my thumb pressing the transmit button. Copy, Overwatch. Identify suspect. There was a pause. A long, heavy silence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Suspect is a civilian female. ID confirmed as Kara Miller. She was caught attempting to insert a flash drive into the auxiliary port. Adam froze. His face went white. Kara, he whispered. I ignored him. Overwatch, say again. Did you say Kara Miller? Affirmative, Ghost. Suspect claims she was... Wait one. She claims she was doing a favor for a friend. She's asking for Private Adam Stevens. Adam let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. No, that's impossible. Kara? She's at the reception. She's waiting for me. She doesn't even know what a server is. Kara was Adam's girlfriend, a sweet, bubbly girl from Alabama who worked as a dental hygienist. She wore sundresses and smelled like vanilla. The idea of her breaking into a top-secret server room was ludicrous, unless she was being used. My mind raced back to the malware signature. Hydra. It was sophisticated, but the delivery method, a physical drive inserted into a secure port, was crude. It required a mule. Someone innocent enough to walk past security without raising alarms, but dumb enough to not ask questions. She's been set up, I said, more to myself than to Adam. Adam grabbed my arm, his grip desperate. Nicole! You have to help her. She wouldn't do this. She loves this country. She loves me. Get a hold of yourself, I snapped, slapping his hand away. I grabbed his chin and forced him to look at me. Listen to me. If she was caught in that room with that drive, she is looking at 20 years in Leavenworth for espionage, federal treason charges. Oh my God, Adam hyperventilated. Oh my God. Panic kills, Private, I said, my voice icy calm. Tears don't fix this. Action does. Someone used her. Someone gave her that drive. Do you know who she's been talking to? Has she mentioned anyone new? A friend who needed a favor? Adam shook his head frantically. No, I don't know. She just said she met a nice guy at the PX who was helping her with a surprise for me. A surprise, I repeated. Of course. I looked at my little brother. He was a mess. His world had been shattered twice in the span of 10 minutes. First, by me, and now by the woman he loved. He looked like he was about to shatter. Before we move on, I want to pause for a second. Have you ever had to be the strong one when everyone else was falling apart? Have you ever had to swallow your own feelings just to get the job done? If you understand that kind of pressure, hit the like button right now. And in the comments, just type, "Stay strong," to show your support for Nicole and Adam. Wipe your face, Private, I ordered, reaching into the back seat and grabbing my laptop bag. The pity party is over. We are going to the holding cells, and we are going to find out who put that drive in her hand. You can fix this, Adam asked, his voice trembling with hope. I'm not going to fix it, I said, opening the truck door and stepping out into the humid night. I'm going to finish it. I looked back at him. Are you coming, or are you staying in the truck? Adam took a deep breath. He wiped his eyes, straightened his helmet, and gripped his rifle. The fear was still there, but something else was pushing through it. Resolve. I'm coming, he said. Good, I said. Follow me, and don't say a word unless I tell you to. We walked toward the SOC building together. 2 soldiers, one in the light, one in the dark. But for the first time in our lives, we were walking in step. The interrogation room was cold, smelling of floor wax and anxiety. Through the one-way mirror, I watched Kara Miller falling apart. She was handcuffed to the metal table, her floral sundress looking pathetically out of place. Her mascara ran down her cheeks in black streaks. I didn't know, she wailed to the MP. Please, I swear, he said he was a friend of Adam's. He said he needed to print a recommendation letter for Adam's file, and the printer in the lobby was broken. Adam stood next to me on the other side of the glass, fists clenched. Who is he, Kara? The MP asked. I need a name. Kara sniffled. Vaughn. His name was Mr. Vaughn. He had a suit on. He looked Important. My blood froze. Vaughn, I whispered. The name tasted like bile. Curtis Vaughn. 5 years ago, I was undercover in Iraq, investigating a fuel theft ring. Vaughn was the civilian contractor in charge. He was slick, charming, and corrupt, selling our diesel to insurgents. I built a case against him, but evidence vanished, witnesses disappeared, and Vaughn walked away with a promotion. He knew Specialist Stevens had been snooping, but he didn't know I was JSOC. He thought I was just a nosy supply clerk. Now, he was here, using my brother's girlfriend as a mule to plant malware. He's trying to frame us, I said, my voice low. Colonel Shaw walked up behind me with a tablet. We traced the malware signature. It's a dead man's switch, designed to corrupt the logistics database, specifically the inventory logs for fuel depots. I let out a humorless laugh. Of course, he's stealing fuel again. He needs to crash the system to hide the discrepancies, and he's using my family to do it. Why your family? Shaw asked. Because he holds a grudge, I said, staring at Kara. And because he thinks I'm weak. He thinks I'm a logistics failure who can't fight back. I turned to Adam. Did you tell anyone I was coming to the graduation? Adam looked terrified. I might have mentioned it to a few guys at the bar last night. Vaughn, he bought us around, said he was an old friend of yours. He surprised us, all right, I muttered. This was personal. Vaughn wasn't just stealing, he was hunting. Colonel, I said. Where is Vaughn? He's in the JAG office, Shaw replied, filing a formal complaint against Private Stevens and you. He claims he saw you give Kara the drive. He's spinning a narrative that you, the disgruntled sister, used your brother's girlfriend to sabotage the base out of jealousy. My jaw tightened. It was a bold, reckless move, but it relied on one key assumption, that I was nobody, that I was just Specialist Nicole Stevens. If that were true, his story would stick. He requested an immediate tribunal hearing, Shaw continued. In 45 minutes. The base commander authorized it because of the severity of the threat. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I saw the messy bun, the jeans, the tired eyes. I saw the woman my family was ashamed of. Then I looked at Kara, terrified and innocent. I looked at Adam, trembling with rage. Vaughn wanted a show. He wanted to humiliate me publicly. He wanted to stand in court, point his finger at the jealous sister, and watch me get dragged away while he walked out with another contract. Okay, I said. He wants a tribunal. Let's give him one. Major, Shaw warned. If you walk into that courtroom, you can't do it as a specialist. You'll have to reveal your rank. 7 years of deep cover. Gone. Are you sure? I looked at Adam. He came for my family, Colonel. My cover doesn't matter anymore. I turned to Frey, standing by the door. Sergeant Frey. Ma'am. Go to my office in the secure wing. In the back of the locker, there is a garment bag. Bring it to me, and bring my full ribbon rack. All of it. Frey's eyes widened. The Class A's, ma'am. The Class A's, I confirmed. And get a JAG officer to prepare a subpoena for Curtis Vaughn's digital records. Use my DHS authorization code. I want every email, every bank transfer, every text message he sent in the last 5 years ready to display on the courtroom screens. Yes, ma'am. Frey sprinted down the hallway. Adam looked at me, confused. Nicole, what are you doing? You can't go in there. Vaughn is powerful. He has lawyers. I put a hand on Adam's shoulder. He has lawyers, Adam. But he doesn't have the truth. And more importantly, I paused, a cold smile touching my lips. He doesn't have the rank. I keyed in a command to the holding cell speaker. Kara, listen to me. Do not say another word. Do not sign anything. I am handling this. Kara looked up, red-eyed. Nicole? I'm here, I said. Colonel Shaw, delay the proceedings by 10 minutes. Tell them the defendant is preparing her defense. Shaw grinned. With pleasure, Major. I walked to the women's locker room. It was empty. I splashed cold water on my face, washing away the dust of the road and the shame of the paper plate. I looked at myself. Showtime, Nicole. Frey walked in, carrying a black garment bag. He hung it on the hook. Fresh from the dry cleaners, ma'am. I unzipped the bag. Inside hung the dark blue Army service uniform, the Class A dress blues, the gold braid on the sleeves, the gold oak leaves of a major on the shoulders, and on the chest, rows of colorful ribbons. The bronze star with valor, the purple heart, the Defense Superior Service Medal. It was a uniform that commanded respect. It was a uniform that told a story of blood, sacrifice, and unyielding duty. It was who I really was. Thank you, Sergeant, I said. Wait outside. I began to undress. Off came the jeans. Off came the t-shirt. Off came the disguise. I pulled on the crisp white shirt. I buttoned the jacket. I adjusted the tie. I pinned the nameplate, Stevens. I looked in the mirror one last time. The woman staring back wasn't the sister who sat on the porch. She was a predator. She was a judge. She was the storm that Curtis Vaughn never saw coming. I straightened my cap, pulled it low over my eyes, and turned toward the door. Vaughn wanted a tribunal. I was going to give him an execution. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread fast that a civilian contractor was pressing charges against a soldier's girlfriend for espionage. The air was thick with tension and the low murmur of gossip. I waited in the vestibule, just outside the heavy oak doors. I could hear Curtis Vaughn's voice through the wood. It was smooth, oily, and dripping with false concern. Your Honor, Vaughn was saying, it brings me no pleasure to be here. I have supported this base for years, but security is paramount. When I saw Ms. Miller attempting to access the restricted network, I was shocked. And when I learned that she was instructed to do so by Specialist Stevens, well, it paints a disturbing picture of negligence within the Stevens family. I adjusted my cuffs. I checked the alignment of my ribbon rack one last time. Through the small window in the door, I could see my parents. They were sitting in the back row, huddled together like frightened children. My father's head was in his hands. My mother was weeping silently into a tissue. They looked broken. They believed the lie. They believed that their failure of a daughter had finally destroyed everything. The prosecution rests, the JAG officer said uncertainly. He looked at the empty defense table. Does the defense have anyone? The judge, a stern-faced colonel named Patterson, looked over his glasses. Is Specialist Stevens present? That was my cue. I didn't open the door. I kicked it. The double doors flew open with a resounding bang that echoed off the high ceilings like a gunshot. The entire room jumped. Every head turned. I stepped into the aisle. I wasn't wearing the grease-stained t-shirt. I wasn't wearing the faded jeans. I was wearing the United States Army Service uniform. The dark blue jacket was tailored to perfection. The gold braid on the sleeves caught the light. On my shoulders, the gold oak leaves of a major gleamed with undeniable authority. But it was my chest that made the room gasp. Rows of colorful ribbons stacked 4 high. The bronze star with a V device for valor. The purple heart. The Defense Meritorious Service Medal. The Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal. And right at the top, the Combat Action Badge. It was the resume of a ghost. It was the history of a warrior who had been everywhere and done everything, all while the world thought she was counting boxes. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor was sharp and deliberate. Clack, clack, clack. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence, the kind of silence where you can hear a heartbreak. Then, reflex took over. A young captain in the front row saw my rank. He shot out of his seat like a spring. "Attention on deck," he screamed. The sound was electric. Instantly, every soldier in the room, MP, JAG officer, clerk, snapped to attention. The rustle of fabric and the stomp of boots filled the air. Even Colonel Patterson, the judge, stood up behind his bench. Only the civilians remained seated. My father looked up, his eyes bulging out of his head. His mouth fell open, his jaw practically hitting his chest. He looked from my face to the rank on my shoulder, his brain trying to process the impossible image before him. My mother stopped crying. the tissue frozen halfway to her nose. And Curtis Vaughn? He turned pale. He gripped the railing of the witness stand, his knuckles turning white. The smirk slid off his face like slime. I didn't look at my parents. I didn't look at the judge. I kept my eyes locked on Vaughn as I marched down the center aisle. I stopped in front of the defense table where Kara was sitting, still handcuffed. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with wonder. "Major Stevens," Judge Patterson said, his voice respectful but confused. "I wasn't aware you were involved in this case." "I am the case, Colonel," I said. My voice didn't need to be loud. It carried the weight of command. I walked up to the witness stand. I stood toe-to-toe with Vaughn. He was a tall man, but right now he looked small. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. "You seem surprised, Mr. Vaughn," I said softly. I don't know who you are," Vaughn stammered, trying to regain his composure. "I was told Specialist Stevens doesn't exist," I cut him off. "She was a cover, a ghost. But I'm very real, and I have a very long memory." I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I am Major Nicole Stevens, Joint Special Operations Command, Cyber Warfare Division. I am taking over this jurisdiction under Title 10, United States Code, Section 302. "On what grounds?" Patterson asked. "On the grounds that the witness, Mr. Curtis Vaughn, is an enemy combatant engaged in active sabotage against the United States military." The room erupted in gasps. Vaughn's lawyer jumped up. "Objection! This is preposterous." "Is it?" I asked. I pulled a small remote from my pocket and pointed it at the large screen behind the judge. "Sergeant Frey, run the file," I ordered into the air. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a PowerPoint presentation. It was a live feed of Vaughn's bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. 5 years ago, I said, pacing in front of the judge's bench. Mr. Vaughn stole $3 million worth of diesel fuel from a supply depot in Fallujah. He thought he got away with it because the investigator, a lowly specialist named Stevens, couldn't make the charges stick. I turned and looked at my father. He was gripping the pew in front of him, his face a mask of shock. He was hearing the story of his failure daughter for the first time. "But I didn't stop investigating," I continued. "I just went deeper. For 5 years, I have tracked every transaction, every email, every bribe. And tonight, Mr. Vaughn made a mistake. He got greedy. He tried to use a dead man's switch to crash our logistics server to cover his tracks before his new contract audit." The screen changed. It showed a text message chain. 2. Unknown from Vaughn message. "The girl is the mule. Use the private's girlfriend. If it blows up, blame the sister. She's a nobody." The text was dated yesterday. "She's a nobody," I read aloud. I turned to Vaughn. "Is that what you thought, Curtis? You thought I was a nobody?" Vaughn was shaking now. Sweat was pouring down his face. This is fabricated. You can't prove that's my phone." "I don't have to," I said. "Because the malware you gave Kara, I wrote the counter code for it 3 years ago. When you activated it, you didn't crash the system. You pinged my personal server. You rang my doorbell, Curtis." I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he and the dead silent courtroom could hear. "You thought you were playing a game with a box kicker, but you were playing chess with a grandmaster, and you just lost your king." I turned to the MPs standing by the door. "Arrest him," I ordered. The MPs didn't hesitate. They rushed the stand. They grabbed Vaughn by the arms and slammed him against the wall. The click of handcuffs echoed through the room, a sound much sweeter than the ones on Kara's wrists. "You can't do this," Vaughn screamed as they dragged him away. "I have friends in the Pentagon. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," I said calmly. "I suggest you use it." As the doors closed behind Vaughn, the courtroom remained frozen. No one moved. No one breathed. Judge Patterson cleared his throat. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and respect. "Major Stevens, regarding the charges against Ms. Miller?" "Dismissed with prejudice, Your Honor," I said. "She was an unknowing asset. I vouch for her." "Case dismissed," Patterson banged his gavel. "And Major, "Welcome home." "Thank you, sir." I turned around. I faced the gallery. My father was standing now. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. His eyes were locked on the bronze star on my chest, the medal for valor in combat, the medal he had always dreamed his son would earn. And it was pinning on the chest of the daughter he had thrown away. He took a step toward me, his hand reaching out, trembling. "Nicole!" I didn't stop. I didn't smile. I didn't acknowledge him. I looked right through him as if he were made of glass, as if he were the ghost now. I walked down the aisle, past him, past my mother, past the stunned crowd. My boots clicked on the floor with the steady rhythm of a soldier who had completed her mission. I pushed open the doors and walked out into the cool, night air. The trial was over. The villain was gone. But the hardest part was yet to come. I had to bury my family, not in the ground, but in my heart. The double doors of the courthouse swung shut behind me, muffling the chaos of the courtroom. But they couldn't block out what was coming next. I knew it. I could feel it. I walked down the wide marble hallway, the sound of my heels sharp and lonely. Clack, clack, clack. "Nicole! Nicole! Wait!" The voice was shrill, desperate, and sickeningly familiar. It was the voice of a woman who realized she had just bet on the losing horse and was scrambling to change her ticket. I stopped. I didn't turn around immediately. I took a breath, centering myself, putting the armor back on over my heart. "Nicole!" My mother, Linda Stevens, came rushing down the hallway. Her mascara was smeared, her hair was slightly disheveled, but her face was wearing a mask I had never seen before. It was a mask of adoration, of pride, of terrifying, desperate love. She reached me, her arms wide open, ready to engulf me in a hug. "Oh, my baby, my brave, wonderful girl. I knew it. I just knew you were special." She lunged for me, trying to wrap her arms around my neck, trying to pull me into the warmth that she had denied me for 32 years. She wanted to be seen hugging the hero. She wanted the officers standing nearby to see the devoted mother embracing her victorious daughter. I stepped back. It was a small movement, but it was a chasm. Her hands grasped at empty air. She stumbled slightly, her smile faltering. "Don't," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was just dead. "Nicole?" she stammered, her eyes wide and wet. "Honey, what's wrong? Mom is here. I'm so proud of you. Why didn't you tell us? We could have celebrated you. We could have—" "Stop," I said, cutting through her babble like a knife through rock. "Don't rewrite history, Linda. You don't get to do that." She flinched at the use of her first name. "Nicole, I'm your mother." "You are the woman who handed me a paper plate last night," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "You are the woman who told me to go sit on the back porch because I didn't fit at the table with the real people. You told me I smelled like grease. You told me I was a failure. I was just stressed," she cried, clutching her pearls. "The party. Adam, you know how your father gets. I was trying to keep the peace." "You weren't keeping the peace," I said. "You were keeping your status. You chose your side. You chose the golden child, and you chose the scapegoat. You were happy to let me be the punching bag as long as it kept your perfect little suburban life intact." I took another step back, creating a physical boundary that mirrored the emotional one. "Do not touch me," I said. "Do not hug me. Do not pretend that you are part of this victory. You banished me to the porch. Stay there." My mother's face crumbled. The mask fell away, leaving behind the pathetic, fearful woman underneath. She sobbed, putting her hand over her mouth, looking around for sympathy that wasn't there. Then I heard the heavy footsteps behind her. My father, Robert Stevens, was walking toward us. He wasn't running. He wasn't shouting. He was walking like a man carrying 100 pounds of lead on his back. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie loose. He looked deflated. The blustering, arrogant patriarch of the parking lot was gone. He stopped a few feet away. He looked at my uniform. He looked at the bronze star. He looked at the rank on my shoulders. "Nicole!" he croaked. His voice was raspy, stripped of its usual boom. I looked at him. I waited. I didn't know, he whispered, shaking his head. I swear to God, kid, I didn't know. If you had just told me. Don't lie to me, Dad, I said softly. Not now. Not after everything. I'm not lying, he pleaded, his hands shaking. I thought you were a clerk. I thought you quit West Point because it was too hard. How was I supposed to know? You knew, I said. You saw the scars on my hands. You saw the way I moved. You saw the 1,000-yard stare in my eyes when I came home for Christmas. You saw it all. I took a step closer to him, lowering my voice so only he could hear the truth that was about to shatter him. You chose not to see it, I said. Because if you admitted that I was strong, if you admitted that I was a warrior, then you would have to admit that you were wrong. You would have to admit that a girl could do what you never did. You would have to admit that your golden boy was just a boy, and your failure was the one protecting him. He flinched as if I had slapped him. You built your entire identity on the idea that men are soldiers and women are nothing, I continued. My success was a threat to your ego, so you buried it. You decided I was a failure because that was the only version of me you could handle. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. Tears, real tears, born of shame and broken pride, welled in his eyes. He choked out, I'm sorry. I know you are, I said. And I meant it. He was a sorry sight, a man hollowed out by his own prejudice. But sorry doesn't fix 7 years, Dad, I said. Sorry doesn't take back the insults. Sorry doesn't put me back at the dinner table. I looked at both of them, my creators, my tormentors, my family. I felt a sharp physical pain in my chest. It was the death of hope, the hope that maybe, just maybe, if I was good enough, if I was strong enough, they would finally love me for who I was. But they didn't love me. They loved the uniform. They loved the medals. And now that I had them, they wanted to love me. But it was too late. Love isn't a reward for performance. It's supposed to be the baseline. Goodbye, Robert. Goodbye, Linda, I said. I didn't call them Mom and Dad. I couldn't. Those titles belonged to people who protected you, not people who sacrificed you. I turned my back on them. Nicole, my mother wailed. Where are you going? Please. Major Stevens, my father called out, trying one last time to use the rank to reach me. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I walked toward the glass doors at the end of the hallway. Outside, the night was dark, but in the distance, I could see the floodlights of the airfield. I walked past a group of young soldiers standing by the door. They saw my rank. They saw the look on my face. They snapped to attention and saluted. I returned their salute. I walked out into the night air. It was humid, sticky, and smelled of jet fuel. To most people, it would smell terrible. To me, it smelled like freedom. Behind me, I left a weeping mother and a broken father standing in a hallway, surrounded by the wreckage of the bridge they had burned. I had won the war. I had defeated the enemy. I had saved the base. But as I walked toward the waiting Humvee that would take me to the airfield, I realized the casualties were high. I had lost my parents, not to death, but to the truth. And sometimes the truth is the deadliest weapon of all. The tarmac at Lawson Army Airfield was alive with the roar of jet engines. A massive C-17 Globemaster III sat waiting on the runway, its dark gray fuselage gleaming under the harsh floodlights. The engines whined with a high-pitched scream that vibrated in your chest, a sound that promised speed, power, and escape. I stood at the base of the loading ramp, the wind from the turbines whipping my hair across my face. My Class A jacket was buttoned tight against the chill of the night, the gold buttons reflecting the runway lights. Major Stevens! I turned. Running across the tarmac, fighting against the prop wash, were two figures, Adam and Kara. They stopped a few feet away, breathless. Kara looked exhausted, her sundress wrinkled, her eyes still red from crying, but she was free. Adam looked different. The boyish uncertainty was gone from his face, replaced by a somber, hardened maturity. We thought you'd leave without saying goodbye, Adam shouted over the roar of the engines. I almost did, I admitted. I looked at Kara. She stepped forward, twisting her hands nervously. Nicole. Major. I don't know how to thank you. I was so scared. I thought my life was over. You held up, Kara, I said. You didn't crack. You didn't sign anything. A lot of trained soldiers would have folded under that kind of pressure. I reached into the pocket of my jacket. My fingers closed around cool, heavy metal. I pulled it out. It was a challenge coin. In the military, a challenge coin is more than just a souvenir. It's a handshake. It's a bond. It's a sign of respect that says, you are one of us. This one was matte black. On one side, it bore the JSOC insignia. On the other, a skull and crossbones with the Latin phrase, sine pari, without equal. I took Kara's hand and pressed the coin into her palm, closing her fingers around it. Keep this, I said. It's not a medal. It's a reminder. You are stronger than you think. You faced a monster tonight, and you survived. Don't let anyone tell you you're weak. Kara looked down at the coin, tears welling up in her eyes again. But this time, they weren't tears of fear. Thank you, she whispered. I turned to Adam, my little brother, the golden child who had finally seen the tarnish on the gold. He stood straight, his shoulders squared. He wasn't looking at the ground anymore. He was looking me in the eye. I'm sorry about Mom and Dad, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I tried to talk to them outside the courthouse. They're in shock. They'll survive, I said. They have their house. They have their reputation. And they have you. I stepped closer to him. I didn't hug him. I put my hand on his shoulder, gripping the fabric of his uniform. Listen to me, Adam, I said, my voice cutting through the wind. You are the pillar now. You are the only honest thing left in that house. Protect them. Love them. But do not let them own you. I squeezed his shoulder harder. Do not let them turn you into a puppet for their ego, I continued. Be your own man. Be the soldier you want to be, not the one Dad wishes he was. Do you understand me? Adam nodded. I understand. Good. I released him. And Adam, the next time you see a logistics clerk, buy her a coffee. You never know who she really is. A small, sad smile touched his lips. Hoo-ah, Major. I took a step back toward the gaping maw of the C-17. The crew chief at the top of the ramp waved at me, signaling that it was time to go. Goodbye, Adam, I said. Adam took a deep breath. He snapped his heels together. He raised his right hand in a slow, deliberate salute. It wasn't the sloppy, hurried salute of a private trying to impress an officer. It was crisp. It was sharp. It was filled with a profound, aching respect. It was a salute from a brother to a sister, from a student to a master, from a man to a warrior. I looked at him for a long moment, memorizing his face. Then I returned the salute. Slow, precise, final. I turned and walked up the ramp. The interior of the C-17 was cavernous and dim, lit by red tactical lights. It smelled of hydraulic fluid and old canvas. I found a jump seat along the wall, strapped myself in, and leaned my head back against the webbing. The ramp hissed shut, sealing out the night, sealing out Georgia, sealing out the life I had left behind. The engines roared to full power. The massive plane shuddered and began to roll. I closed my eyes as gravity pushed me back into the seat. I pictured my parents standing in that hallway, small and broken. I pictured the empty chair at the dinner table. I pictured the paper plate in the trash. For 32 years, I had defined myself by that empty chair. I had defined myself by their rejection. I had let the hole in my heart shape the person I became. But as the wheels left the ground, as the plane banked sharply into the dark sky, I felt something shift inside me. The hole wasn't there anymore. It had been filled. Not by their love. I knew now that I would never have that in the way I wanted. But by something stronger. It was filled by the truth. It was filled by the weight of the coin in Kara's hand. It was filled by the look in Adam's eyes when he saluted me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own coin. I rubbed my thumb over the raised letters. Without equal. I looked out the small porthole window. Below me, The lights of Fort Benning were shrinking, turning into a cluster of glittering stars in the black void of the south. Somewhere down there was a house with a hero banner on the garage. Somewhere down there was a porch where I had eaten alone. Let them have the house. Let them have the banner. Let them have the lie. I had the sky. I had the mission. I had a brother who finally knew my name. And for the first time in my life, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a disappointment. I didn't see a box kicker. I didn't see a ghost. I saw Nicole Stevens. And she was enough. The plane leveled off, cruising toward a sunrise I hadn't seen yet, toward a future that was entirely, beautifully my own. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 7 years, I slept without dreaming of home. Thank you for listening to Nicole's story. If you made it this far, you are part of our squad now. This story reminds us that sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But it also reminds us that we have the power to define our own worth. If you believe that family is about loyalty and respect, not just blood, please hit the like button. And in the comments, I want you to tag a chosen family member, a friend who has stood by you when things got tough. Or just leave a blue heart emoji to show your support for all the silent warriors out there. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Until next time, stay strong.